Welcome everyone to A to Z Podcast, an Ultraman podcast. In this show, we're going to talk about everything related to Ultraman under the sun. And I am John. My online handle is it's Gaim to Duel, and some people just call me Gaim. So you can call me Gaim, you can call me John. It doesn't really matter. But I am joined with my lovely co-host and friend, Dr. Swooce.
Hello, everyone. I am the science scientist, the doctor of disaster, and the madman with the plan. And I am the co-host for the most. And we are going to be A to Zett, your podcast for this evening.
That's fantastic, my friend. That's fantastic. So, this is going to be kind of an introduction to the show. Kind of walk you through what we plan this podcast to be about and kind of who we are, because when I listen to new podcasts, if I don't really care about the people I'm listening to, why am I even listening to the podcast? Like, why do I care what you think if I don't even know your name or who you are?
That's right. Why should I care who you are? Who are you? What is this? And why do you know so much about tall men that are made of light?
Oh, yes. So what I kind of want to do is kind of introduce ourselves a little bit so that you can kind of connect with us a little bit and know where we're coming from and our point of views as far as Ultraman, Tokusatsu, just things of that genre. Like I said, you can call me John. I've been in school for the past quite a long time. So me and my friend was thinking about doing this podcast a few months ago, but I had to finish up all that jazz so I could have time to actually focus on this.
And what a 2 months it was. Good memories.
Year,
Not really. It was a struggle for everyone.
Yeah, this year has been kind of rough.
But
hopefully
hey, who hasn't had a rough
2021
year?
is different.
Yeah.
Let's hope that's different. But yeah, so would you like to introduce yourself a little bit?
All right. So what is up, everyone? The good doctor began his journey into the online front roughly about 2 years ago. I run a small Twitch channel. Feel free to go check it out. But now that shameless plug's out of the way, my general interests include playing RPGs, generally annoying anybody I can come into contact with, and having mild to severe opinions about things I know nothing about.
Yeah, that's more true than you think. But yeah, so I particularly would like to start by kind of painting a picture of how we became fans of Tokusatsu. Like, what is our quote-unquote Toku story? Since Swooce and myself are in our general 20s, we grew up in that post-Power Rangers era. So we all grew up watching Power Rangers as a kid. So that is very much our first foray into the Tokusatsu genre as a whole.
Yeah, very first contact. For me, it was Lightspeed Rescue. I saw a few sparse episodes of the original Mighty Morphin, but when I first really started watching it, Lightspeed was what was airing.
Right, and we're about the same age, so Lightspeed Rescue was definitely the first series that was quote-unquote my own. That was the one where I was getting toys for it, and I was watching it every week. I was super invested in Lightspeed Rescue. I absolutely loved that series, and it's partly the reason why it's my favorite Power Ranger series to this day. But I have a older brother who was into Power Rangers as well. So we had quite a lot of VHSs from the video store, and recorded off of television with those VHSs airings of certain episodes of Power Rangers, especially when they did the marathons that they used to run. I had basically watched MMPR seasons 1, 2, and 3, Zeo and Turbo, and a little bit of In Space, but most of that Zordon era, my consumption of it came from VHSs that we either bought or my parents recorded for my brother and then was passed down to me, and then also my brother's toys, which was hand-me-down down to me. So I, while not old enough to have been in Power Rangers as it was starting, I kind of caught back up to it.
For me, it wasn't really like a huge catch-up thing. Like, I really enjoyed Power Rangers as a little kid, but it like wasn't one of the things I was like mainly into. You know, I was way more of a Pokemon nerd. Kind of still am. That's irrelevant. But I definitely watched a lot of the Lightspeed Rescue and then stuff coming after that. Like, I wasn't really the watch every week type of kid. I was like, oh, let's just watch what's on. So I got a lot of like bits and pieces of story, which, you know, for lots of the Power Ranger genre really works because it's Monster of the Week and there's not like a super coherent through story. There's like elements, you know, but it really overall episode to episode doesn't matter.
Yeah.
So like,
especially for the early stuff.
Yeah. So like, and same as you, I got a lot of like the early VHS tapes, but I didn't even know what Zeo was. Honestly, like I found about that way later because I had some Mighty Morphin VHS tapes, and then I had a friend who had the Turbo VHS tapes.
The Turbo movie?
Yeah, the Turbo movie VHS.
Yeah.
And
that
like,
was the thing.
And like that's all I really even knew or ever saw of Turbo or of like Mighty Morphin was just like what I could get on a VHS. So like I didn't know Zeo existed till like way later, and I randomly happened to catch I think one episode on the Fox box, I think. Yeah.
Right.
And it was like, and I was so baffled, like what is even this? And it was like the episode I think where Billy tries to become the Gold Ranger, but like right before I think the actor bowed out of the series.
Yeah, that was a whole story we won't get into right now, but maybe we'll touch
No. Like, I didn't know the context, like even back then, but all I knew was he tried and he couldn't do it, so they had to find somebody else. I think I don't even know how that arc resolved. Like I said, I saw one episode. I could not tell you what happens in Zeo. All I know is the Gold Ranger shows up and then can't be the Gold Ranger.
Well, I wanted to touch upon what you said at the beginning of that. You were talking about you were very much a Pokemon nerd and still kind of am. Of course, me too. Pokemon's been a constant in my life ever since a child, and very much like my same story with my older brother and Power Rangers. It was the same thing with Pokemon. Gen 3 with Sapphire was my first game that was mine. That was the one where I went out to the store, and obviously not my own money at this point in time, but it was Christmas money and birthday money saved up, but it was money that as a child was mine, and I got Pokemon Sapphire, and that was the first Pokemon game that the reason why I had it was because I wanted it. But very much like the hand-me-down for my MMPR toys and stuff like that, I got my brother's old Game Boy Color, and I got blue and red and yellow and crystal. I don't think we had gold or silver, but we might have. Memory's a little foggy, but I definitely grew up playing Gen 1, Gen 2, and Gen 3, even though I was only in the target demographic for Gen 3.
You know what's kind of funny? I'm starting to realize more and more that I never really realized before.
What's that?
You and me pretty much had like the same entry level experiences in a lot of things. But the only difference is like you had an older brother who you had an older brother that was like, "Hey, let me give you my hand-me-downs first." Because like I didn't have that experience obviously, but
and he was definitely the kind of kid who grew too cool for these kinds of things. He grew out of Power Rangers. He grew out of Pokemon, you know? So he discarded these things. These are baby things. I'm cool now. So he very much discarded those things. So I took them on, and I really never grew out of it, you know? That I still like these things. And speaking of what you were talking about with having the same entry points, this is another off-topic thing, but our Transformers series that we both really got into Transformers with was Transformers Armada as well.
Yeah, that is true. I still have my Optimus Prime somewhere.
I don't have my original one, but I definitely have one at this point.
Yeah, he's missing the smokestacks that turn into the gun, but other than that, like I still have the Minicon and I still have like the trailer, and everything is still together. So
when I rebought mine a few years ago, I made sure that it had all of those pieces, but my original one is long gone from a house fire from when I was a kid to yard sales and multiple moves. So a lot of that stuff never survived.
It would have been impressive if it did.
Yeah, indeed. But to go on that Pokemon thing, we won't get into this today, but Pokemon has a really interesting Ultraman connection.
It does.
That I want to dive into at a later date.
That's going to be fun.
Yeah, it really will be, but I just kind of wanted to touch on that, or at least mention it, that Pokemon's not necessarily unrelated to this conversation. They have an interesting tie to Ultraman that we can get into at a later date. But
yep, stay tuned, everyone, because the answer might shock you. It actually goes a lot deeper too than some like surface level stuff than when I first originally heard it. And
yeah, it's actually pretty cool. But so I grew up. I was into Power Rangers for a number of years. I think the last series that I remember watching at a relatively decent pace was probably Jungle Fury or SPD. I can't remember which one came first.
SPD came first. I can say definitely it's Jungle Fury because that's also the point where I hopped off.
Wow. Us being such close friends for the longest as we have.
We're gonna do a Toku podcast, you guys. We never talk about our experiences at all till right now, and hey, here you go.
And we're learning so much about each other just off the cuff like this. It's kind of funny. But yeah, so I guess Jungle Fury was the spot that I kind of jumped off at. I don't think I got back into Power Rangers until college. I think it was 2014 was the year, or yeah, it was the 2014 was the year when all that happened, wasn't it?
What? Oh, when we got into everything? 2014, 2015. I don't remember the exact time.
So I want to say it was 2014. I don't think it was quite 2013. But let's say, just for posterity's sake, end of 2013 through 2014 is when kind of all of these factors kind of cascaded into itself, which got us to where we are today. I'll start this bit because that's kind of where the story starts.
Go for it.
I moved out at my first little bit in college. Me and a roommate were playing. Me and my roommate that we got real close. We had another roommate who was moving out, and he had about a week until he was gone, and had his Xbox and everything set out in the common place or the common area. So he said that as long as I'm still here, y'all guys can use this freely, no problems. Feel free, you know? So we took advantage of that time and we played some Forza. He played a first-person shooter. I'm not entirely sure what it was, but that's not my type of game, so I didn't really pay too much attention to that. But one night we got it was real late and we were skimming through his Netflix account, and we saw that pretty much every season of Power Rangers was on Netflix. And at this point, I don't know if this was a thing that had just happened at that time. I don't exactly know the timeline of that, but it was the first time that it came to our knowledge. So we were like, whoa, we both used to love Power Rangers. This is kind of cool. So we sat there and spent that whole night just watching through random episodes. It was like we watched a couple episodes from this one season, then a couple episodes from this other season. And then we were, I was like, you know, Lightspeed was my favorite. Let's watch a few episodes of Lightspeed. So while we're doing this, we're sitting in here like, because we're too cool for Power Rangers at this point, we're sitting here mocking it. You know, we're like, oh, this is so stupid. Look how dumb this is. This, wow. But
to be fair,
yeah. To be fair, you're right. Some of it is pretty rough, and some of it doesn't hold up. Some of it does hold up, but some of it doesn't.
Like, I still think it's funny. Like, one good descriptor of Power Rangers, even still probably to today, I don't know, I haven't seen any recent episodes, is it's all backflips and explosions, because kinda, yeah.
Yeah.
But in a good way. It's in an enjoyable, cringy kind of way, I would think.
Right, but this is where it changed. So as we watched more and more episodes, it swapped from mocking it to, as the night went on, we were genuinely just watching it out of the enjoyment of it. So in one night, it went from us like just stumbling upon this, you know, like, for example, pulling up Goosebumps and watching a couple episodes for pure nostalgia's sake. And it swapped from that to actually enjoying watching what we were watching, which is really kind of fascinating the way it happened, because like we had no intention of actually caring, and we just kind of got sucked back into it. We got sucked back into our childhoods. We got sucked back into that nostalgia, just the memories of enjoying that. It just kind of brought us back there. So that day passed. The roommate moved out, and we moved on with, just kept going, you know, school, work, etc., moving on. And then one day I was like, you want to watch some more Power Rangers? And he was like, yeah, kind of. So I was doing a little bit of Googling, and I don't know if this is true about you, but I kind of always knew that Power Rangers came from a Japanese TV show.
Yeah.
I never cared. It was like,
I'd heard that at some point, and I was like, okay, who cares?
Right. And at this point, it was very much like growing up, I never knew it. I never cared. And I never really had an intention of caring.
Me either.
As we got older, especially before this, I was kind of getting into anime a little bit.
Yeah.
So it was that intrigue of, well, I remember this, and I remember most of these because I watched a good chunk of them growing up, you know?
Mm-hmm.
If I didn't watch every episode of every season, I saw a good chunk. I saw the beginning, some middle, and the endings of most of the seasons up until like Jungle Fury, that kind of area.
Right.
But it very much switched to like, you know what? Let me see if I can try to find some of these episodes. Let's try to find some of these episodes and like compare and contrast them compared to what I remember. And some seasons, for example, Gal Ranger, aka the Super Sentai version of Wild Force, Power Rangers Wild Force, though minus a brand new villain for the Power Ranger season, those seasons are just about beat for beat the same show. The plot lines, the through lines, they're pretty much beat for beat the exact same show. Then you kind of switch to like Ginga Man, or that's the Japanese version of Power Rangers Lost Galaxy. Those are so completely different. Like Ginga Man was very much about a like nature-based Sentai, and they rode horses.
Oh yeah, I remember you showing me pictures of this. The horses like have armor and everything.
The horses had armor that matched their costumes.
And like, I don't want you guys to think it's some kind of weird CG horse that kind of looks like a robot. It was an actual horse.
Exactly, it was an actual horse.
I feel like we need to point that out because in that one weren't the Zords like had like kaiju forms that were like all organic, or was I thinking of
Yes, that's exactly what they were.
Yeah.
In the American version, they called it Galactabeast.
That's right.
And they were basically like these Sofubi style kaiju vinyls that would then transform into like a more robotic version of that animal. Then would then combine like the Megazord as per the Power Rangers formula.
Mm-hmm.
But the American version was about a space station called Terra Venture hurtling through space, and they had these hover not cycles, but like they looked like flying sleds that they sat in with engine boosters on each side.
Yeah.
So you got a space themed team out of a nature based theme, and these contradictions, or not necessarily contradictions, but these differences really appealed to me.
I think
so.
I feel like a lot of the Sentai got transferred into like space-based themes, even if they were like kind of weird, because Mega Ranger turned into In Space, and like they're like tech-based, both still there, so that makes sense for a slide. But at the same time, there is a big difference between a cybernetic type Sentai versus a Space Ranger.
Right.
I think that has to do with a lot of America for a very long time was infatuated with the idea of space. Still is, really, but I digress. The point is, America likes space, so a lot of them became space-based.
Right. And, of course, like, space sold toys, you know? That was cool. You know, rockets and stuff.
Right.
But the point being is these differences kind of intrigued us enough to start digging through different stuff. So, at this point in time, me and my roommate, we wanted to see what was the current new thing. And the current new thing was called Resha Sentai Tokuja. Resha Sentai Tokuja. It's trains. That's it. Everything is a train. And this kind of harkened back to, as you know, Lightspeed Rescue being our favorite. The big Megazord in that series was the Super Train Megazord. It was this giant train that all of the normal Megazords could fit inside, and it carried them along.
Most of them.
Well, the spaceship was the one at the front.
Yeah.
But yeah, the main Megazord could fit inside, and it was a train, and then you pulled the guys out, and then it combined into this giant thing. So that nostalgia right there. And I mean, of course, trains are cool, you know?
Trains are cool. They take you places.
I wouldn't know much about trains in general, but I just like them. They're cool. So we got into Tokuger, and it was a very different tone than we thought it was going to be. It was very kiddie, per se, but that's because that was who they were targeting.
Mm-hmm.
But for some reason, I guess, I can't speak for my roommate, but for myself specifically, the thing that really connected me to that show was the pure joy of it. It was unapologetic joy. It was just fun.
Like, just good vibes and fun, and like, we can do this in like a cheesy way, but not like an overly cheesy way.
Well, I mean, even in the overly cheesy way, it was unapologetic about what it was. It was just fun.
Right.
It was a rainbow train that transformed, and they got more trains as the show went along, and they all kind of smushed together, as they do. And
as they used
the show was just fun. And I could watch it and just kind of, it washed away the stresses of the day.
Right.
And that right there, that spark, was a spark I hadn't felt since Lightspeed Rescue as a 5 or 6 year old.
Mm-hmm.
And it was that spark that just kind of ignited me into the genre. So this was the ongoing show. So I think it was probably in its 30s at this point, 30s or 40s. It probably had.
It hadn't finished. I know it hadn't finished by the time I came around. Which, by the way, I never watched Tokuger. I think I watched maybe the first 2 episodes. So,
right.
But around here, I guess this is where my part of the story kind of picks up into it.
Right. But before you kind of take over, let me kind of finish my thought here.
Sure, go for it.
So yeah, I definitely, at this point, it was probably 30s episode, and they have like roughly 47 to 50 episodes a general season, because they run all year long, and then the next one it's something different. Me and my roommate got super into this, and I just got into Sentai as a whole. So I was like, I'm a Sentai fan now, so I'm going to watch all these different Sentais. The next one that I watched from start to finish, because Tokuger was still going on, so that was the first one I started, but it was still ongoing. So I watched a few series and finished them while that was still going on. I watched Shinkenger, and then I watched Kyoryuger. Those were the next ones that I watched and finished. And then do you remember how we became aware of Kamen Rider?
Yeah, that actually is part of my story.
Okay, so I'm going to pass it off to you, let you continue this.
So largely, as spoken of way back earlier today, we were talking about how our origins, the Toku was heavily rooted in like early Power Rangers, Lightspeed Rescue, etc. One key difference was I vividly remember watching one of the only Rider shows that ever got brought over to America, and it was Kamen Rider Dragon Knight, which is the American take on Kamen Rider Ryuki. And so I remember watching that. I don't think it ever finished. I don't remember ever seeing the end of it, but that was one I remember watching all the way through. I think it was on the WB, if I recall correctly. Not sure.
I don't know.
Not sure. The point is, I watched it. I was really into it. And I watched that, but then growing out of all the Rider or Sentai type stuff. Moving along, getting into college level, all that stuff. Me and old boy here started hanging out more over common ground and Yu-Gi-Oh! Of all things. If I remember, like, because like we chatted a bit while we were still in high school together. Like, he was in a higher grade than I was.
I don't remember because I didn't get back into Yu-Gi-Oh! Until I started hanging out with those friends at college.
Right.
But during high school, I was into Magic the Gathering. So I think we started with Magic and then transitioned over to Yu-Gi-Oh!
Oh, you know what? You're right. I remember now because I don't even think it was because of the card games. I think we were hanging out because we both just happened to be in the same after-school program. Remember?
Yeah, that was for sure.
Yeah,
case.
that's how it was. But anyway. But we really didn't hang out much in high school. It was mostly a matter of you do this and like, oh, I'm also interested in this. And we had like a little bit of common ground and we ate lunch at the same time. That was about it, if I remember.
Yeah, and it wasn't necessarily that we had mutual friends. We just found ourselves at the same place at the same time.
Oh, we had one mutual friend.
Yeah, I guess that's true. Yeah, we had mutual friends, but it was more so we just found ourselves in the same place at the same time, and it just kind of happened.
Yeah. But so anyway though, college comes around. John here has gotten into Super Sentai. And so I'm hanging out at his apartment one day and he is like, "Hey, I've been getting into this. You want to watch some of it and get on board with it with me?" And I look at it, and I think that's how I watched the first episode. And I'm like, cool, I don't want to watch any more of this. Have you ever heard of Kamen Rider? Because we were talking about the same thing, I remember fondly watching Dragon Knight. Does not hold up, by the way, in my opinion. Like at all.
You on that? There's some die-hard Dragon Knight fans. Some people will fight you on that. But
so you can fight me on that. But we watched the first episode, and the CG bike scenes they're hilarious because of how bad they are. I still think the plot for Dragon Knight's good. I just don't think the special effects they used were good.
I can't really speak on that because I don't know. I can't remember, and I haven't really watched it, maybe except for the first episode or so.
Oh yeah, well, the first episode is where you'll see all you need to see. But yeah. So knowing about Dragon Knight, I was like, well, I remember liking this more than Power Rangers largely, because aside from Lightspeed, I pretty much liked Dragon Knight better than any of the Power Rangers. I was like, this probably has a Japanese version too. Let's see what this is about. And we were really open to trying it, so we looked up whatever the current rider was at the time, which happened to be Kamen Rider Gaim. And oh my gosh, that was such a different show than anything from episode 1.
Yeah, I'll get into this more at the end, but I do want to do some like bonus episodes of non-Ultraman related shows, and I want to cover Kamen Rider Gaim and Reminisce Sentai Tokusastu at some point. But
and we will,
and we'll get into why that's such a different thing. But
yeah,
it's still my favorite Kamen Rider to this day.
It's one of mine.
I've seen a lot less Kamen Rider than Swooce here.
I have watched all of the Heisei era riders. Technically, I've watched all of the Reiwa now, because I'm up to date.
Well, yeah, right. I think I've seen maybe 5 or 6 full series, and then started 2 or 3. But yeah, that very much like struck a chord with me. So much so, and that Kamen Rider Gaim is such a departure from the Kamen Rider series as a whole. And we'll get into that later, but I don't want to spend too much time on that.
Right.
But it definitely made it difficult for me to really enjoy Kamen Rider a little bit right at the end of that, because I loved Gaim so much. I wanted more of that. But it's such a different thing than all the the usual Kamen Rider shows.
I mean, Kamen Rider
it
tends...
took me a little while. It took me a little while to get into it.
Yeah.
But I definitely did get into it. It just took me a little bit longer than per se you, because you definitely went gung ho into it, and I kind of stayed on the Sentai side, and you stayed on the Kamen Rider side.
Which how it was for really a couple years now, until for various reasons. I guess that brings us back up into current, how we got into Ultraman. We both felt a little slighted by the current seasons we were watching.
Right. Yeah, I'll paint a little bit of that picture, because I think I kind of shoved you into it at this point.
You definitely shoved me into it. Or I wouldn't say shoved, but you were like, we're hanging out, we're doing this.
Because I think I tried to get you to watch at least 3 or 4 different series before it finally took. I would say shoving was probably an apt description, because I was really pushy about it.
And it's funny because you got me into it, and then you almost lost me immediately.
Yeah,
we'll get into that in a bit. We can get into that today.
Before the horse here.
Huh?
We're putting the cart before the horse here. Let's wrap this up, and then we'll get into that.
Right. So
let's kind of finish the bit about Kamen Rider real quick.
So yeah, Kamen Rider was my favorite, and still is my favorite Toku show. I do really like Ultraman, of course. Wouldn't be here if I didn't. But like, that's the show that really got me into the Tokusatsu genre. I went back and I watched at first just a couple random series, and then I went back and started at Kuga and watched everything up into current. And that was not the best idea, because I almost burned myself out really bad on it.
Right.
So guys, even if you really like something, don't watch 6 different series in the span of a month.
I've done that several times. I did burn myself out on Super Sentai for a little while there.
Mm-hmm.
But I wouldn't say I've ever burned myself out on Ultraman.
It helps that there's not as much.
Well, that's true. But as far as the season, the new generation seasons being 25 episodes apiece, as opposed to being 50 episodes apiece.
Yeah.
That definitely helps a little bit. When we get into the other Ultraman series, like the Showa and the early Heisei, that necessarily won't be the case, because most of them are around 50.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll have to pace ourselves, and we'll get into that a little bit later. But did you finish what you wanted to say about Kamen Rider?
Probably. I think so.
All right. Well, let's get to let me step back a little bit and kind of describe how I came into Ultraman.
Right.
I stopped going to college in 2015 because I did a associate's degree, and I took some time off and then went back to school, and I kind of just finished. But I took some time off, and I was working a job, and this job was a decent job, but there was a lot of lull and a lot of time like waste, where you were just sitting around doing nothing for hours on end. But when you were doing stuff, it was quintessential that you did it at that moment. But there was very much some downtime. So I really got into podcasts. This is kind of the first time I ever started listening to podcasts, and I got into podcasts, and to kind of like eat up some of that time, you know. I found this podcast called RRR, Riders, Rangers, and Rambles. This podcast was the first podcast I actually ever listened to, and it was about Tokusatsu. It was about Super Sentai and Kamen Rider, and Power Rangers by extension. I learned a decent amount from this podcast, and it really kind of helped me get into the Tokusatsu fandom, quote unquote, you know. When I found this podcast, it was in its last 3 or 4 months. They were finishing at that point in time. And I just listened to the whole thing. There was 10 years worth of podcasts.
Wow.
And over my time at the job, over a period of time, I listened to the entire back catalog. And around this time was kind of when they were getting those 3 co-hosts, Shuki, Dawson Rider, and Kevin. They were getting really, really busy with their lives at that time. So they were a weekly, and then they weren't a weekly, then they were a bi-weekly, then they were a monthly, then they were is it bi-monthly? That's every other month?
Yeah.
Anyway, they were every other month, and then it just kind of disappeared. So at this point, they all had YouTube channels, and they did toy reviews of Tokusatsu toys and stuff like that. So I was watching their YouTube channels, and I was getting into this stuff. And one of the hosts, Shuki, got together with a friend named Chris from Long's Toys, and they made a show called Geeky Tweak, which technically is still going on, but they haven't done an episode here recently. And I'll kind of elaborate a little bit on why in a minute. But I got into this podcast. And around this time, they were both really getting into Ultraman. This was about 2016, I think, is where it was at. They knew about Ginga. Or at least Shuki did. Knew about Ginga. Didn't like Ginga.
Yeah.
Watched X, enjoyed X, and then really, really, really got into Ultraman when Orb came out. So around the time Orb came out was when they were all getting into Ultraman, which I was following their content, so I was seeing a lot of Ultraman content. So I was like, okay, I don't know anything about this. I don't know where to start. I don't know anything. Is it good? Should I watch any of it? You know, these were the kind of questions I was asking myself. And this went on a little while, and Jeed was airing, I think. Because by the time I got into Ultraman, Jeed was currently airing. I watched Ultraman Orb because this was their favorite season. So I watched Ultraman Orb, just jumping in, not knowing anything about it. Some people say you shouldn't start with Ultraman Orb because it's an anniversary season. It calls back to its previous, at the time, 50 years worth of stuff. And his powers come from fusing together 2 previous Ultraman's powers together, which is kind of a thing that they really haven't let go of since Orb. But
yeah,
we'll get into that later. But I was mesmerized by it. I don't know why, but I just loved it so much. And around the time I finished Orb, Jeed was almost done. And Ultraman Jeed also used the thing of fusing together 2 previous Ultraman, putting them together. And by the time I finished watching through Jeed, the last episode aired. So, like, the day I got to the last episode was the day it aired. So I caught up right on the tail end of Jeed. And I finished Jeed. And then after I watched Orb and Jeed, I was hooked. I was hooked. I loved this crap. So, because Zero's so heavy in Jeed presently, like, he's there, I wanted to find out more about Zero, because I'm like, I really liked that guy. I want to learn more about him. So I went out and found anything related to him and watched everything related to him. And then I was like, this is really cool. So I watched X, and then Ginga and Ginga S, and then I started watching just random things, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Around this time was when I was trying to initially get you into Ultraman.
Yeah. Well, I'll talk about that when
Yeah, go ahead and point on to that.
Okay.
And then I'll butt in and finish a little bit of it.
So yeah, so Gaim here starts getting into the old Ultraman stuff. Really liking it, really digging it. And you see, it's worth noting that before that, he's also tried to get me to watch a lot of the Super Sentais and had mixed results and success, because largely, for whatever reason, I really like Rider, and then Sentai I feel like is like a lot of more hit and miss. I'm not sure why.
You really liked Go Busters, though.
I really liked Go Busters. Hold up. Go Busters is hype, and I will fight you on that if you say otherwise.
Busters, ready, go!
Yeah, I really liked Go Busters. I thought I can't think of their name now. Pirate Boys. What's their name?
Go Kaiger.
Go Kaiger. I like Go Kaiger. Go Kaiger was fun.
Go Kaiger.
Like, it was good, but I didn't think the show picked up until Silver showed up. I don't know. I think he added the element of fun that the show needed. Because for a Sentai,
because he goes,
it was a little too serious. Yeah, I feel like that was a little too serious, though.
He's over the top so much. I love him.
Yeah, but he's the over-the-top Sentai fanboy, and I was like, I love it.
Yeah. I'm like, that's me. I project onto him. That's me in that show.
Yeah, exactly, right? But, yeah, mixed results getting me to watch things.
Right.
A lot of misses really on Sentai for me. Didn't work out a lot. So, and then he's like, hey, I got something new for you to watch. It's called Ultraman.
Yeah.
And I'm like, are you sure about that? I don't know. Because at the time, I wasn't really a Tokusatsu fan, to be fair. I was a Kamen Rider fan who watched Sentai sometimes.
Right, and I was a Tokusatsu fan. I'm just like,
by that point, you had gone full in. Like, you've been full in way more now, especially with broader strokes. But we'll get into like other Toku we've seen later. For now, the point is, he was trying to get me to watch Ultraman, and I was at first just like, no, I don't want to. And then one day I went to visit him, because by this point he had moved. And it was a long trip, and I was like, whatever, we'll watch some Ultraman if it'll make you happy. So this was his one chance. He had to really wow me and impress me with the show. So of course he decides to show me the first few episodes of Ultraman Orb, and it didn't work at first.
Right.
Like, I watched it, I was like, okay, it's not awful. But largely, I just didn't care. Sorry. Yeah, largely, I just didn't care.
Right. And at this point, I was really confused. Like, this was what pulled me in. Why is this not pulling you in? Like, this is so cool. Like, what do you not see? So, at this point, I'm like, all right, game plan. So, the next time I go down to see you, I don't remember if it was the exact next time, but the next time I got you to watch Ultraman, I'm like, well, how about Jeed? Because Jeed was like, right there, I'm like, okay, this is awesome. Maybe you'll get into Jeed. So I had you watch maybe the first one or two episodes.
No, I wouldn't do it.
You watched two.
I wouldn't do it. I didn't watch any of Jeed.
I thought you watched at least the opening.
No.
The first episode.
No. I didn't touch Jeed till I finished Orb.
You didn't watch the first? I swear I thought you watched the first episode.
No. You couldn't get me to do it.
Oh,
I think we ended up watching some anime.
Yeah, there's no telling what it was.
I'm not sure exactly what happened, but I do know I didn't even see Jeed until I'd finished Orb. But no, I know what you're thinking of. So here's what happened. I began a new job at some point, like early last year, because this is what actually I think got me into Orb. No, I hadn't started the job yet.
No,
you know what? Now I don't remember. I don't remember what happened. I think I just decided to give Orb another shot.
No, I'll tell you what happened. It was because you watched Rube first.
Oh, you're right. Rube was airing.
This is what happened. I think I talked you down enough to be like, all right, this is the next series coming out. Yeah, you should give at least this series a try, and if you don't like it, that's fine.
Yeah, it was new. It was exciting. I was actually watching. Was that with during Lupin v. Pat?
I'll have to look at the years to line it up, but I know you were watching Q Ranger when it was coming.
No, yeah, that's what it was. Okay, Q Ranger was also really good, and I was hype enough, and he got me into the Q Ranger. And I was like, all right, you really like this Ultraman stuff. I'm really digging Q Ranger. And I wouldn't have watched it if it wasn't for you. I'll watch your Lube show.
Yeah, it's Ultraman Rube. So
Rube.
Ultraman Rube.
It sounds like they're saying Lube.
R/B.
Yeah,
so
it's pronounced Rube, but
it's about two brothers, Rosso and Blue. So red and blue. And they're brothers. There's two Ultraman, etc. So it's written out Ultraman R/B. Mm-hmm. It's pronounced Ultraman Rube. But as the way Japanese works is the L's and the R's are the same letters. By the way, if this is a little annoying, I apologize. I minored in Japanese, so I know just enough to make myself dangerous. I know just enough to pretend that I know what I'm talking about and then get something wrong.
It's okay. We only pretend to know what we're talking about here.
Right. But I do know a decent amount, and I will try and help shed some light on some of that stuff. But I'm a person and I'm still learning and still a beginner. So if I do make a mistake, I apologize. But anyway, so L's and R's.
L's and R's.
Those are the 5 letters. They're the same
sound, essentially.
When switching from English to Japanese, they use L's and R's for that same 5 letters.
Right.
And so that's where the stereotypical putting an R where an L goes or whatever. It's very much just because it's the same letter. They don't know when they're going to English. They don't know if they're supposed to use an L or they're supposed to use an R. And because at that point they're just guessing, so it gets really weird. But the funny part for us is because the way that works is sometimes there's unintended mishaps where, for example, this show Rube, which doesn't really mean anything, but because lube is a thing,
it's an actual thing. You know, WD-40 and all that.
Well, yes, that kind too. But because that's a thing, it makes it kind of funny. Mm-hmm. But that was completely unintentional. So
it's a very slippery slope.
Because Rube.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yes. What was I saying? Man, you really threw me off there.
Good. I'm glad.
Okay, so I convinced you to watch the show. Somehow. And I almost started to regret it because we'll cover Rube at some point, but it's not a terrible show.
No, it's not terrible. It's just not as good.
I'd describe it as not the best showing for a new generation series. It's not terrible. but there's so much better to offer. And for it to be his first series to watch from start to finish, it left a, I guess, poor taste in his mouth.
It wasn't. Well, don't speak for me. I'm right here.
I'm sorry.
So yeah, like it.
Sorry.
I don't know. Like I watched it and I wasn't hooked or drawn into it. It was like it was just part of my routine at that point, honestly.
Right.
And I was like, okay, I'm not super into this.
It was this week's homework.
Yeah, it was all right. I watched it along with the things I liked because I watched it with Q Ranger and I watched it with what was the writer at the time?
Maybe Build?
Build? If it was Build, then I was like in some really good other Toku, so probably.
Yeah.
Because like Build is really good.
Might have been X-Aid.
Oh, if it was X-Aid, then I was definitely full in at the time.
I can't remember exactly the year. We'd have to look at the years to line it up, but
yeah, but I think let's see, X8 and Build right next to each. So it could have been either, really. So that was like a good. So whichever one it was a good year for Rider. It was a good year for Sentai, and right. I was willing to give Ultra a shot, and I wasn't as hooked. But watching Sentai is it's like Ultra's a really good bridge because Sentai is targeted at a younger audience, while it's not that Rider's targeted at an older audience, but it's targeted at a somewhat older audience.
Yeah, and I feel like while Sentai and Ultraman's kind of like targeting that 3 to 5 age group, Rider's targeting 7 to 12.
Yeah, but
or 5 to 7, as some people refer to it as. But sure. No, go ahead.
But yeah, so I was already expecting it to be a somewhat more watered down show, like your Sentai, like not say watered down, that sounds really negative. A more
bare bones.
Bare bones. It's meant for like small children. I can't expect like deep plot lines or anything like that.
Right.
So I was watching it and I was like, okay. Like it's not amazing. I wish they would develop a bit more quickly. But other than that, like it didn't leave an impression. I didn't hate it, but it didn't draw me in. But like I said, I think probably what helped though that still was watching. Well, I don't know. Actually, it was really dangerous because I'd almost stopped watching Ultra altogether. Yeah. I think it was X-Aid and then Build, because I know I watched enough and was okay with watching it enough that when Taiga rolled around the next year, I was willing to watch Taiga.
Yeah, but I don't think you ever got maybe 10 episodes in or less.
No, I didn't get very far in Taiga, not because I disliked it, but it was really, really hard to find ways to watch Taiga at all.
Yeah, the fan subbers were definitely they would, like, for example, for Kamen Rider and Super Sentai, that week's episode would come out. They would sub it. You would maybe be able to watch it 4 or 5 days after that. Watch it the next week. Rinse, repeat. This one, they would take several weeks off, and then they would release 3 or 4 episodes, and then bulk release like that. So and then somewhere halfway during the point, they didn't even finish subbing it until the show was already over.
So this combined with the fact that I wasn't super into it still, and it was still, and to be fair, a trend I still see with a lot of Toku in general is a lot of the early episodes aren't good for hooking you for some reason. I find that bizarre that they don't do a good job usually. Sometimes they do. There's always exceptions, but it's you got to give it a few episodes to marinate. At least that's how I feel about them.
I agree, especially for Sentai. Sentai has the pilot problem, is a way of saying it. They have to establish the team. They have to establish the changers and the toys for this season, whatever the gimmick is. They have to establish the robot, and they have to establish the general plot. So you're asking a whole lot of a show to establish in 22 minutes. So a lot of Toku pilots feel extremely rushed, and you need to give it a few episodes for it to have found its stride and breathe a little bit to where you actually enjoy.
Yeah. So the problem is you don't always have that luxury. Like if you're watching it week to week, sure, that's one thing. Or if you're like have a huge bulk of time and you can do that, like, you know, that's fine too. The problem with Taiga was they were taking those huge gaps and then dropping these huge bombs of episodes. And at the time, I just did not have the free time to catch up. So I was like, I'm sorry, I'm just not watching this. And I didn't. I did not watch it at all.
All right. And this is where... Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, so this is where I was getting confused. Like where he was getting confused, because I decided to, like... so I took a long time off from Ultraman. Didn't watch any of it. And then I got to where I started my new job. And I think around this time...
Before you get into your job,
yeah.
Let me stop you real quick. This is around the time, which I want to do a whole episode explaining the crazy back and forth with this child lawsuit.
Yeah.
Now is not the time. But around this time is kind of when the lawsuit was kind of coming to an end. And basically, Tsuburaya was having a hard time marketing Ultraman to the West because this company falsely claimed that they had the right to do so. I will get into that at a later date, but for now, around this time is kind of when it was stopping, where it was kind of being, it was kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? Like the verdict fell with Tsuburaya that they were in the right. So now they were able to move forward with making efforts of releasing things to the Western audience.
They've done an amazing job.
Creek Entertainment. What?
Which they've done an amazing job looking at you, Rider and Sentai.
Absolutely. They need to learn something from Tsuburaya with this. That's for sure.
Yeah.
But so Mill Creek stepped in and acquired the rights to release Blu-ray sets of Ultraman. And in the past year or so, they've released Ultraman, Ultra 7, Neo Ultra, Ultra Q, Neo Ultra Q, Ultraman Ace, Return of Ultraman, G, Orb Origin Saga, Rube, Ginga X, Ginga S, I think that's it. But regardless, that is like 10 or 12 seasons in a year. Like, absolutely unheard of. Like, I had no intention of, or I had no expectation of this, as well as, because being Rider and Sentai fans, we basically just kind of reserved the fact that we would never get physical releases of the shows we like.
Yeah, like, this was game changing, which at the time, once again, I didn't care, but I kind of appreciated it because in a way I was genre envious,
right?
I suppose, because like I was like, I want that for Rider.
For Rider, exactly.
Still haven't gotten it, but hey, you know, looking at you guys, here's hoping. Like, I'm not gonna give up hope that we're gonna get Rider in America at some point, and I don't mean like dubs or anything.
Right. This past year, some balls have moved, some things have happened. They're still not quite to where Tsuburaya is, but let's hope that maybe 2021 they will do a little bit more.
Yes.
But back to the kind of timeline. This was kind of when so I was getting all of these releases because I'm already hooked on Ultraman at this point. I'm buying every single one of them. I absolutely have to tell Mill Creek with my dollar that we want more of this. You are doing the right thing releasing these things, and keep those things coming.
So I'm sitting here buying
every single release.
Well, no. You weren't. You were only buying the new generation stuff. What happened was
correct. You are correct. I was buying just New Generation stuff.
So
and we'll go ahead, say what you're gonna say, and then I've got to say a little bit on that.
So yeah, he was just buying New Generation stuff, and randomly, I don't know what happened. Like, I think it was his birthday, so I was like, "Oh, hey, look!"
Yeah, you got it for me for my birthday.
Yeah, I got him the original Ultraman series on DVD. I was like, "Oh, I didn't know this was a thing." Huh?
It was Blu-ray.
It was a Blu-ray. Yeah.
Yeah.
Same thing.
Yeah.
Still though, I got it for him. I was like, "Oh, he's gonna love this. He loves this Ultraman stuff." And this is like the first series.
Right.
And I got him that. and that's how he started buying all of them.
Which actually isn't the first series, because as you were confused by, why is there a number 2 on the side?
Right. There was a number 2 on it, and I was really confused and scared.
Right. Ultra Q being the first series, and then the second season series being Ultraman. We'll get into all that. There's tons of backstory to lay out there. We'll get into all that.
Right.
Now's not the time. But you that is correct. You did definitely. I was definitely only getting the series I had watched and enjoyed, and stuff I knew I'd wanted to watch. But at this time, so here's a differing viewpoint that I want to bring up.
Sure.
Me and Swooce here kind of have like a Showa bias, because what we love, we didn't grow up with any of this stuff. Like, there's other podcasts. I'll get into this. There's no hate towards any of these guys. I love these guys. I'll get into that towards the end of this podcast. But for people who enjoy, like people who are in their 50s or whatever, they grew up with old Godzilla films and when Ultraman 66 was dubbed and released on American television. They grew up with this stuff. They have that nostalgia for the Showa series. We missed all that. We don't have that nostalgia. So coming from Kamen Rider, especially as people, and Super Sentai, coming from people who are in their 20s and kind of grew up with what we grew up with, we have that bias towards the 90s series and the 2000s series, and we enjoy what's out now. We kind of have a Showa bias, where I know I've tried to watch the first few episodes of some of the older Sentai, and I don't even know if I've watched the first couple episodes of the original Kamen Rider. I don't know how far you dived into any of that. But
so on that topic, it's actually really funny. You've seen more Showa Rider than I have, because the only Showa Rider I've seen is literally the Zeo movie.
Oh yeah.
I haven't touched it at all. I've been meaning to. It's tough.
Yeah. And it's especially coming from us with the background we have, it's very, very difficult for us to enjoy those series. And I'm not knocking anyone who enjoys those series. I'm sure there's tons of people who love them. But it was just very, very difficult for us to get into them.
It's not our kettle and pot.
Right. And because we're coming from that background, I assumed Ultraman was the same way. So I automatically had a bias against the Showa. I didn't really care to watch it. I wasn't going to give it a chance. I liked the new stuff. That's what I was going to focus on. Granted, I've changed my tune since then. I have just recently watched the original Ultraman series, and frankly, I loved it. There was a few episodes that was kind of hard for me to watch, but when it was good, man, was it good. And I think it still holds up. We'll do an episode on that eventually. But, so,
Swooce has to do his research.
I definitely had a bias against the Showa stuff. But it was because you gave me the original Ultraman on Blu-ray. I'm like, it's that collector brain in me. Well, I have one now. I just might as well collect them all, right?
Right.
So it's that itch that always needs to be scratched. You know, it's collector brain, that addict brain. You know, it's you already gave me one, so I might as well complete them all. And plus, you know, giving Mill Creek more money on this just tells them we want more releases, which even if I don't enjoy this series, they might release one that I really want them to release because the money came in from this one. You know, the whole vote with your wallet thing. So
yeah,
I got all of the Mill Creek releases, and as they came out, I got them all. They have a digital way to watch where they come with digital codes through their Movie Spree app.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this was when the chips were in place, so to speak.
Right. So the setup that would finally pull me in.
Exactly. So I have the entire library that has been released thus far on digital. You have an ability to see this on your phone. Right. And you have a new job that I'll let you get into.
Right. So essentially, without going into details, what my job is, I ended up. It's a lot of on-demand work as well. It's a job where like I sit there, if there's no busy work to be done and nobody is calling to ask me to do something, I just don't have anything to do. It's like if it's not broken, then I don't have anything to fix, essentially. So I was like, okay, so I need things to do. So you know, first thing you do is you try to do bits of different stuff. I tried learning another language. I did a lot of origami. You know, normal downtime things, I guess. For someone who is an otaku.
Yeah.
But at some point I was like, I just need stuff to watch. Like, I've been watching these series on YouTube. I need something else. What am I into that I haven't seen? I heard about that Mill Creek thing that my buddy, or Spree thing, he kept telling me about. I was like, I wonder if I can connect to that while I'm at my workplace. The answer was yes. It didn't get blocked. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to give Ultraman Orb a shot. I didn't remember where I was. I just started it over, and I think I watched the whole thing in about a week.
Yeah.
And I don't mean the show. I think I mean all the specials as well.
Right, at that point, they had the Ultraman series proper, Ultraman Orb Origin, or Ultraman Orb the Origin Saga, which is the prequel series, Ultraman Orb the movie, which is a sequel to the series, as well as Ultra Fight Orb, which is a sequel to the movie.
Right. So I still wouldn't say at that point I was super into Ultraman, but I was back into the, okay, I'm willing to watch this show again. And I really liked Orb, but I wasn't willing enough to like try and watch it on my own. So that's probably where you're thinking of when you came over and were like, okay, I gotta get him to watch Jeed, because I know I watched Jeed next. Because I remember you were talking about that earlier, your plan.
Yeah, my memory has it that happened way earlier. That Jeed was one of the things where I tried to get you into it at the beginning, but that might have just been an episode of Orb. But yeah, at this point, I think was when you really kind of got into Jeed.
Yeah,
and you got through Jeed, and
also really quickly.
Yeah, quite quickly. And this was the point when you started eating up more series.
Yeah. I mean, it was still a bit slow, but I was much more open to like, all right, I'm going to watch more Ultra. And I think from there, I went to X.
Yeah, probably X. That sounds about right.
And then I watched, well, it took me a bit, but you finally convinced me to watch Ginga.
Yeah.
And
Ginga,
I think
Ginga is a series that I recommend with a long footnote of things to take into account and forgive it for.
Which you can't. Honestly, It's not great, but it's a fun show. Like, it's funny. They had a lot of good ideas, and they had a killer theme song. So it's a lot easier to appreciate. Ginga S was way better.
Yeah.
But I do appreciate Ginga for what it is. It walked so the new generation could run.
That is probably the most apt description of Ginga, because Ginga, like I said, we'll get into this at a later date, but Super I was in a whole heap of financial trouble at this point, mostly due to the lawsuit and other factors as well, with them not actually having major releases to go along. They were really, really trying to get back in. Oh, excuse me. They were really trying to get back into the forefront of this genre. And while they made tons of, I guess you could say, mistakes, or not necessarily mistakes, but like it's as you said, they walked so that X and Orb especially could run. And as you watch through X, then Ginga S, as you watch through Ginga and then Ginga S is a hand over fist improvement on Ginga, and then X is a hand over and fist improvement on Ginga S. And then Orb just blew X out of the water with improvements, and it just has gotten better, with a few lulls, in my opinion, but Zett being so good,
Yeah, like, it just recently finished here within the past couple weeks, and I really like that one.
Yeah, me too.
Like,
and
it
was go ahead, sorry.
And it had a really good release. Back to the whole Super Aya's doing it right. They made Zett really easily to access. And I really appreciated that, because it was like, oh, cool. I don't have to go and break the bank on some kind of new account to watch this.
They put Ultraman Zett on the official Super Aya YouTube channel 30 minutes after it aired on Japanese cable with English subtitles. That is absolutely unheard of in this genre.
Yeah, like, oh my gosh. It was like a really bold thing to do, I guess, because nobody's ever done it before. Like, it's something that I feel like people, like the fans, were hoping, or could never dream something like this would happen. Like, there'd be a lot of steps in between now and there.
Well,
but
I might have to make a mild correction there, because during Orb and Jeed, they were also simulcast on Crunchyroll.
Oh, well,
but you know how Crunchyroll, well, we weren't into it at that point.
Yeah,
I get it. But they definitely, they did the thing where if you were a Crunchyroll member, you know how they have the free subscription and then the one you have to pay for. Right. The one you had to pay for was the one where you could get it, like, I don't know if it was the day after or if it was like an hour or so after, but it wasn't like at the exact same time. Correct me if I'm wrong, audience, but I think that was the case. But if you had the free one, you had to wait a week for the new episode, which is kind of what they do with their current running anime now as it is. Which is fine. It's not like you can really get spoilers from across the ocean. I mean, I guess you can. You always can, but most of the time you're going to get spoilers from people who read the manga. That's a different conversation, different genre. The point being, waiting a week is not the biggest. It's like not really a detriment at all. Right, but after G, they didn't do that anymore. And I think this was kind of where they, because if I'm not mistaken, Rube and Taiga were also put on their YouTube channel, but they were region blocked to the west. So it was only for their Eastern viewers. Really? I didn't know that. Taiga was on their YouTube channel, but it was blocked to the United States, and it didn't have English subtitles, to my knowledge.
Well, once again, comes from the side of I had no idea that happened. So,
right.
like, and it would still be blocked. Like, you wouldn't see it in searches if it's blocked in your region. I don't think.
Correct.
So, like,
Correct.
that's one of those things. Like, it's still not accessible. Like, sure, there were steps in there, but it's steps you wouldn't see looking at it from the outside unless you knew what was going on from trying to follow the series as much as you can.
In hindsight, since Tiger was the previous series, I think in hindsight it was almost like a trial run to see if what they could do with Zett would work.
I think it did.
Well, I mean, obviously it did. I mean, see exactly. Zett being so good, there was so many people I know who I've been trying to get into Ultraman, who hasn't bitten the bullet. Like it took forever to get to bite the bullet, but you're finally quote unquote indoctrinated into it.
Oh, is that how you want to say it?
I don't know. I think it's a funny way of saying it. But so many people I've talked to on Twitter, and I know from other podcasts and stuff like that, so many people I know got into Ultraman because of Zett, because it was so readily available and so easy to watch. All you had to do was watch that current episode within 2 weeks. They took it down, and you had 2 weeks worth of episodes up there at a time.
So it's not a perfect system, I guess, ideally, but it makes sense because they'll probably do a release.
Yeah. It wasn't perfect, but it worked, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And as long as you kept on top of it, you were able to watch it week to week. And it was fantastic.
Which also puts in the FOMO factor.
FOMO?
Fear of missing out.
Oh.
Yeah. Like, which is a huge draw in like marketing. It's like, hey, this is like, now it's a limited thing. So not only do you want to watch it, but you got a limited time to do it. If you don't, it's gone, and then you won't be able to see it.
Right. Yeah,
least, for a while.
The fear of missing out definitely can be a motivating factor for people to get into it. It's not the best factor.
No.
Because it definitely is a double-edged sword where you definitely get the mindset of, I'm afraid of missing out. Oh crap, I missed one. Now, instead of me putting the effort up to getting back into it, I'm just dropping it completely. So it's not a perfect tactic to use, but I think it definitely helped some in this case.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's kind of where we are now, you know, where I've seen a pretty decent chunk of Ultraman shows. And you've seen less than me, but a pretty decent chunk, especially for someone who wasn't necessarily an Ultra fan maybe 2 years ago.
Yeah, like I've seen almost all of the new generation. I can't say completely because I still haven't finished Taiga, by the way. I've revisited it. I've watched some episodes. I'm still waiting on the Mill Creek release. I'll probably be able to watch it good then.
Right. I'm not sure the timetable on.
Well, we just got Rube, so maybe next year.
Yeah, but no. Well, let me elaborate a little bit. I'm not entirely sure on the timetable of Taiga because when Mill Creek made their release, Rube was the only other finished season. So it was Rube back is what they got the license for. So they technically don't have the license for it because it wasn't out yet.
Oh.
But usually with those kinds of clauses, whenever the rights come up, Mill Creek will be the first in line, and they'll more or less get the rights to it automatically, you know?
Yeah.
Obviously, money will have to exchange hands.
I mean, it's always going to be a smooth process, but yeah, I mean, it shouldn't be a problem.
It shouldn't be a problem. You're right. And as far as I can tell, the Mill Creek releases have been doing absolutely fantastic. And I think the Mill Creek higher ups are very surprised that it's doing as well as it is, and they're extremely excited about it doing so well.
Of
And I
course, they're
think it's
excited to
very
make some
much
money.
well, yes, but it's as far as like corporate goes, it's like it helps it helps show them where their efforts should be focused on, so as opposed to another release or another franchise that they have the right to, by putting more resources towards the Ultraman one, as opposed to it not selling as well, so they'll still do all the releases, but instead of maybe once a month, it might be once every other month or something like that. It's
Yeah.
like showing that the customer base wants what they're putting out, and that the releases are selling well, puts more incentive on them to do more releases and more incentive on them to focus on that franchise. That's my point. Was what I was trying to make.
Right.
But yeah, I think that kind of comes to the end of what we wanted to talk about with as far as kind of our Toku story, like where we came from, our perspective on Tokusatsu
How did we get here
genre.
now?
Yeah, where we're at now, how we became a Kamen Rider, Super Sentai, and Ultraman fan. How our perspective kind of differs than the podcast you'll hear right now. That's kind of where I want to get into now. I want to basically explain why I wanted to do this podcast. Why this podcast, why us, etc. So, with my job, I listen to quite a lot of podcasts because it helps get the day through, So I listen to a few Tokusatsu podcasts. I listen to, when you Google Ultraman Podcast, you're only really going to get one major podcast, with the exception of a new podcast that kind of popped up. The new podcast is the writers of the Marvel comic book. They've put out like behind the scenes podcasts of basically their thought process behind writing each issue and some behind the scenes stuff. That's like a limited podcast because it was a limited series.
Which reminds me, I need to catch up on that.
I don't necessarily count that, but other than that, there's only one major Ultraman podcast, which I'm a huge fan of, by the way. I love these guys. It's called The Science Patrol, and it's which you haven't listened to any of this. I don't even think I've shared it with you.
No, I haven't.
It's called The Science Patrol. It's with Rich Conroy and Patrick Rooney, two 50-something guys. Rich being one who grew up with Ultraman, the original Ultraman, dubbed in English on Philadelphia station television back when he was a child. He grew up watching Godzilla movies and was blown away by it because it was like a mini Godzilla movie on TV every week. And as he likes to say, once that was over, he didn't know there was any other Ultraman until him going to college. So that whole perspective is the perspective you hear time and time again on other kaiju-related podcasts. Since that's the only Ultraman podcast, just by searching the keyword of Ultraman through my podcatcher, a lot of kaiju and like Godzilla-related podcasts have done Ultraman-themed episodes, but these are coming from Godzilla fans. Now, depending on their age, these fans are usually fans of the Showa Godzilla films, and they usually only ever care about the first 3 or 4 series of Ultraman because they're the most similar to those Showa era Godzilla films. So it's very similar to what they like. So that's all fine and good. There's no problem with that. But it's just, as I'm trying to find more content to listen to while I'm at work, I keep finding that this is the overwhelming mindset towards Ultraman in the podcast space, where it's just people who really only care about the first stuff. They only really care about the new stuff. Now, Patrick Rooney and what? Or the old stuff. Sorry, I misspoke. Only really care about the old stuff. Now, with the Science Patrol, that's not necessarily the case, because they watch the new stuff, they watch the old stuff, they watch everything in between, and they all give it a fair shake. And they absolutely love Orb. They love Zett, they love Orb. They really have enjoyed that. But they come from that perspective of, Rich does, with the growing up with the original Ultraman. His co-host had not seen any Ultraman until the day they did episode 1. They did episode 1, watched the first episode, and that was the first time he even knew what an Ultraman was.
Fun.
It's a great show. I recommend it. And I'm in their YouTube, I'm in their Facebook page. I comment with them. I talk to them. They're great guys. Lots of love. If y'all hear this and have not heard of them, go give them a follow. Go give them a shake. Go say hey. But it just felt unsatisfying to me, because I wanted to listen to content of people who like Ultraman the way I like Ultraman. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Like, essentially the reason we're here is because we're creating the content that we want to see. We're making a change in the world, you guys.
Yeah, and that's really what it was. It was like, I want a podcast like this. I can't find a podcast like this. Why not I make a podcast like this? And this usually isn't a kind of thing I do.
No. It's not.
That's what I'm saying. This is not really a thing that I do. So the fact that A, I decided to do it, and B,
he's putting in a lot of the forefront and the effort here, you guys. Like, now for me, I do this stuff all the time. Like, as I said at the beginning, I'm a streamer. I go live 2 to 3 times a week, and I am everybody's scientist. I do the crazy things. Gaim here, he's always been the watcher type. So honestly, I'm really happy for you. Like, I'm glad to see you taking all this initiative. I am glad to be your partner here on this, and I cannot wait to see where this podcast goes.
I really, really appreciate that, because when I thought about this, there was not another person I wanted to do this thing with. I was like, if he says no to this, then this thing's dead in the water. I don't actually want to do this. And I really appreciate that when I brought this idea to you, you jumped right on board. You were like, yeah, absolutely. This sounds like a great idea. And me not being the type of person to make content, I'm always like a consumer of content. I follow a lot of people. I watch a lot of YouTube channels. I am somewhat proactive in some aspects of community, but I don't create much. I just kind of discuss with people and just kind of hang out.
Right.
Which mainly probably due to like my workload with me being in school here recently, and me now kind of not being in school anymore, kind of has opened up a time frame for me to actually do these kinds of things. That's partly why we are releasing this when we are, because I wanted to kind of finish up my last semester and get all of those stressors out of my life so I could focus on this.
And
but
here we are.
I brought this to you, when I brought this idea to you, I said, would you like to make an Ultraman podcast? And you were I kind of basically pitched you out the idea, and when I went off on it, I got the impression that you were blown away by how much thought I had already put into this.
I was actually. So like I said, like I knew your background, and I don't think there's anything wrong with being, the guy who just who likes to consume the content. Like, you got your own stuff going on. Like, I don't have time to make the thing I want to make, and that's fine. You got your own stuff, and like making content isn't for everybody. Not everybody enjoys it. That's completely okay. So to hear you come to me about this thing you love, and then at the time, this was a couple months ago, so I wasn't even head over foot into Ultraman yet. So, or head over heels, I guess. Whatever your analogy floats your goat.
Right.
He came to me with this. I was like, okay, I don't know anything about Ultraman, and I was kind of expecting, like, I'm gonna have to do a lot of work on this. I don't know if I really want to put in the time. And but not only that, he gave me like a whole bunch of ideas, kind of how he wanted to lay it out. Like, he had done so much research into like the topics and stuff as to what we are going to be doing. I couldn't help but say I'm in, because I was excited to actually do something like I would never do a podcast on my own. And
wow.
I love creating content, but I don't feel like podcasting was something I would normally want to do. And yet you had so much already put into this. I was blown away. Like, I wasn't expecting, one, for you to ever want to make any content at all, and two,
Right.
to not like to have say, here's my idea. Also, here's all the work I've already put into it, like spreadsheets full of work, and it was just so much prep work. I was like, yes, I'm in. Let's do this.
Right. And even so, I'm gonna pull the curtain back a little bit on this thing. We're recording this kind of at the end of 2020 with Christmas just passing, and I had this. I'm not entirely sure when this episode will even go up. Our intentions are somewhere at the beginning of 2021, but I've had this idea in my head since probably August. I have been mulling this over since August, and I don't think I even came to you with it till the end of September or early October.
Honestly, I don't remember either. I blame that on this year, because this whole year low-key blurs together.
You ain't wrong about that, but my point being is I had already been thinking about this for a month or two before I even brought it to your attention. Because I kept talking myself into it and talking myself out of it. And I just kept mulling it over, and I'm like, well, do I really want to do this? Yes, I really kind of do want to do this. Do I? Yeah. Do I? No. Do I? Yeah. And I kind of, well, what will the show be like? So at this point, I told you, like, I've been listening to a lot of podcasts. So I kind of get the general feel and the way that they go. And there's some things that people do that I want to do, and there's a lot of things that people do that I don't want to do. And I didn't want to make a podcast that felt super radio. I didn't want to, all right, this is the show. We talk for 10 minutes, then we break. I have to basically stop you from what you're talking about. We're going to break for a minute, throw an ad in here, and then come back and then basically do that. I didn't want that at all. My favorite podcast is the RRR, which I brought up already. And I didn't mention, but they do have a sequel series called RRR The Streets that they stream on YouTube every Friday night. If anybody actually cares about looking into that. Most of the guests have come back, or most of the original it started with a new cast, then the original cast came back, joined them, and then you've lost people over the time, and then some new people have come in, and it's been a revolving door. But their thing is they hit live and they just talk, they just hang out, and they have okay, we're going to talk about the news, then we're going to talk about this week's Toku, and they have a structure, but the structure's only there loosely. They play with the structure, and it's all about conversation. Yeah. They have a whole... Hold on.
So essentially, like, and that's what I think we're going to be going for here too. Like, there's a lot of back and forth, taking turns talking this time, but that's largely because these aren't input-based stories. These are us telling our backgrounds. Like we had a bit of back and forth when the story started to converge.
Right.
But largely, that wasn't what today was. Will be in the future, I think.
Yes. What I was saying was they kind of just talk, and then they just kind of it's a conversation stream of consciousness, you know, and it's as the conversation flows, the show changes. So the show changes for the conversation doesn't change for the show.
Right.
And that's kind of the effect I want to give, is just it's me and you just talking. And we bring that listener in this conversation. When you first kind of got into, when you first watched Orb and then afterward with Jeed, we had long conversations about the intricacies of the show, things we liked, things we didn't. And I was like, this conversation, this is the kind of podcast I want to listen to. So that was when it first was in my head, we could do a podcast. You know, that's, if we had just recorded this, that was a podcast.
I feel like this is a conversation I think we had a couple times, was after you first brought it up, like we knew we couldn't do it immediately.
Right.
Like situations being what it is now, we're able to. But like we were still watching stuff, we were still doing stuff, we were still having conversations, and on more than one occasion, like that came, I was like, hey, we could have made a podcast out of that. Which once again always reaffirmed to me is like, oh yeah, he's definitely into it.
Yeah.
Because that's all. Like,
yeah. So
that's also one thing too. I was kind of worried about was like you came at this. Well, I didn't know you were mulling it over for so long until just now. But like I thought you just kind of threw this at me out of nowhere, and I was like, is his interest in this gonna hold up?
Right.
And the answer, by the way, was yes. That was like a first worry when he first brought this to me. And he has not shut up about it since.
Yeah, you're not wrong. I've been pretty kind of annoying about it, actually.
I wouldn't say you're annoying about it. It's not like it's the only thing you talk about. Like, but it comes up relevantly when it should. Right. And he always comment in such ways that's like, yeah, he's definitely thinking about this a lot, and in the best way.
Yeah.
Like, so don't get me wrong.
Yeah. Right. So that's just kind of, no, I guess what I wouldn't say in summary, but that's just kind of like where we come from. This is the way we have experienced Tokusatsu. And this is kind of what we want to do with our show. And we would really, really enjoy it if you would like to come along with that. Come along with us on that journey, you know?
Life is an adventure, and we try to walk a new one every day. At least that's what I think. So come join us, my friends. What journeys and what adventures we shall go on, who knows? That's the best part of it. There is no idea what comes next, what we're going to do. But by gosh, we are going to have this adventure together. And for everybody that sticks around, I appreciate it.
Yeah, and I definitely second that. I appreciate it wholeheartedly. And I'll tell you one thing, Swooce, man. This past, like, I think 2 hours or something like that. I had no intention of letting this episode be but maybe like an hour or so. But
before we started, quick background note. I was worried this was going to be like a 30-minute thing, and then we were going to be stuck. But
Right.
So.
But yeah, so let me kind of pull the curtains on this a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
I've set up a Twitter account.
Right.
You can find us on Twitter at A to Zett Podcast. That's ATOZETT PODCAST Podcast on Twitter. Go ahead and give us a follow. Give us a like.
Ring that bell. Slap that heart. Repub. All the other things.
Yeah, ring that bell. Climb them stairs and whatnot.
Yeah, snap your Twitter and chat your books.
Yeah,
am I hip with the kids now?
Jazz.
Yeah.
Yeah, something like that.
Sorry, your 19th century technology.
That's right. Follow us on Twitter, and we also have a YouTube channel, which is A to Zett Podcast.
Wait, we do?
Yes, we do have a YouTube channel that has been made.
Oh.
By yours truly. We have a YouTube channel, so go follow that as if you want. We intend to upload all of our episodes on the YouTube channel, and I don't know if we ever intend to uploading any other kind of videos, but we might. I'm not going to close the door on that. But go follow us on YouTube and send us an email, please. If we get like comments or questions or any really thing you want to speak to us about, maybe suggestions for topics or whatnot, whatever you want to send to us, go ahead, send us an email. We'll read it on the show if, viewer discretion.
Hey, don't write a check.
If it's obscene or whatever, I'm not going to read it. And if it's probably not pertaining to the show that we want to provide, I might forgo reading it. But, if it's something that pertains to the show, if it's something enjoyable, if it's something that
I can experience
reading,
or something,
I have no problem reading it on the show.
Actually, let's go ahead and say, if you're going to send us an email, let us know if you want us to read it, because I don't want to get like a personal email and be like, oh, this is real sweet, I want to share this, and then like read it out and then get another email saying I didn't want you to do that.
Yeah, that's a good idea. I didn't even think about that. But go ahead, in your email, say if you don't want us to read it or if it's fine to be read. Go ahead, just put that in there, and we'll do as you say.
Do be aware, though, if you say I do want it to be read and we don't get hard feelings, because
absolutely
sometimes stuff just happens. Like, we'll read it if we can, but like if we feel like it. If if you put something in there, you're not supposed to, of course we're not going to read it.
Right.
But like if it's like something that doesn't quite go with the episode, and it might go with an episode that's coming up, then we might push it off. And with our upload schedule at this point being still in the air, to be fair,
right?
We don't want to say, oh, we're going to read your email, and then we get some emails in and then don't read them. So yeah, that's true too. So kind of look at it as if we might read your email. We'll read your email, but we might read it on screen. Let's make a difference.
Yeah, we will read all the emails we get, but we might read it on the show. Thank you for putting that down there for me. We'll just kind of like cover our bases, but that email address is A2ZPodcast, the same as the others, at gmail.com. So feel free to send us an email. Well, we would love to hear from you. We will read the emails we get. If it pertains to what we're talking about and through our discretion is not inappropriate, we may read it on the show if you want us to. Did I put enough qualifiers in there?
Probably not, but I'm not a lawyer.
Okay. Well, basically just treat it as if we
It's a
as
tentative.
suggestion.
We're gonna read your stuff, maybe. Don't
Right.
send us your spicy fanfics, because
Yeah.
we may or may not read your spicy Ultraman fanfic.
Of course, you had to bring that up because now that's the next thing we'll get. All right.
I'll do it though. Like we'll have an
Send
episode
all
on
your
reading
Send all of your
PG.
spicy fanfics to Swooce on Twitter, not our
No,
podcast.
oh wait, here, I'll put that down. Send your spicy fanfics to me on either Twitter or wherever, and I might or may not read them one day on my Twitch channel because I can do whatever I want over there.
Right. Okay. So, would you like to plug your Twitter and your Twitch?
I would. So, if you would be so kind, you can go over to Dr. Swooce on Twitch. That's really all it is. It's Dr. Swooce ZX. There we go.
Yes.
Very, very important. And I
Go ahead and
believe
spell that for him.
it's DRSWOOCE ZX on Twitter or on Twitch. And I believe Twitter has the same one. Let me. Yeah, no, it's almost exact. No, it is actually the same. Yeah, it's exactly the same. Just at Dr. Swooce ZX. So
Yeah. Well,
link in the description below.
yeah, we're gonna put all the links in the doobly-doos later. I guess that's about it. You know?
And that is our first show. Everyone, thank you all so much for listening to two morons speak about their childhood for the past 2 hours.
Yeah, that was quite self-indulgent, but you know, it's an introduction episode, so
But now you know who we are, and you probably still
Right.
don't care, but that's fine. I don't care about
Yeah.
me either. The important bit is what happens next, not what's already happened.
yeah, that's true. So, I guess that's John and Swooce signing out. So be sure to watch out for the next one.
What was that?
I don't know, something I wanted to try, but apparently it might not have worked. All right.
We'll talk about that. But until next time, everybody, stay ultra.
See ya.